So have you guys ever been to the self-help section of a bookstore? Good. So you may have noted two different things. First, America loves self-help books because these sections are huge. And second, there's a lot of self-help books about making yourself happy. So as an aspiring psychologist, I find this self-help section extremely interesting. And one book that I found particularly interesting is David Tuffley's book, Being Happy. I've read and studied this book, and I found that though its advice is very basic, there's some advice in it that you guys will probably find extremely interesting. And this is advice about being happier in your everyday life. So in this lecture, I will summarize one of David Tuffley's big pieces of advice that I believe we can all use in our lives to experience more happiness. With this piece of advice, I'll also provide an example so that you guys can see what it looks like to live according to it. However, before we discuss Tuffley's advice, I have to set up the background research so that you guys can understand where Tuffley's coming from. So Tuffley begins his book with a discussion of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This theory states that humans have 5 basic needs that they have to fulfill. And Maslow organized these needs into a pyramid, with the most basic needs on the bottom that progress upward to more complex needs. It starts with the physiological needs, which are for food, sleep, to drink water. It progresses to safety needs, for security, safety. Social needs, to feel loved, to feel accepted, to feel part of a group. Esteem needs, which are to feel a sense of accomplishment in yourself. And then finally, self-actualization. And Maslow describes self-actualization as the desire for self-fulfillment and the desire to become more and more of what one truly is and to become everything that one is capable of becoming. This is what Tuffley considers to be the key to unlocking true happiness. According to Maslow, though, a person cannot begin to fulfill the next level of needs until they've completely fulfilled the level of needs below it. So, to begin working on self-actualization, one has to fulfill their esteem needs, their social needs, their safety needs, and their physiological needs. So, Tuffley assumes that if a person can indeed fulfill all of these needs and begin work on their self-actualization, he offers them this one great piece of advice. His advice is this. He says to experience things fully, vividly, and selflessly. He says that a self-actualized person always tries to experience everything in their lives with their 100% attention and their 100% effort. He said that self-actualized people, and I quote, throw themselves into experiencing things, something fully, they concentrate on it fully, and they allow it to totally absorb them. In other words, self-actualized people are always engaged mentally, and they're fully engaged in the present situation. Tuffley says that in order to do this, a person must do 2 things. First, they must fully accept the circumstances of the present moment. Now, this is easier said than done because we often find ourselves in situations where we don't really want to be there. And by even thinking of something else that we'd rather be doing, Tuffley says that we are dividing our attention and alienating ourselves from the situation. We shouldn't do this. The second thing a person must do is to be mindful of their own thoughts. Tuffley describes this like opening the task manager on a computer where you can view all the things that are going on at any given moment. This kind of mindfulness allows a person to focus on the present moment without being distracted by the past or the future. By being able to live 100% in the current moment, Tuffley says that we observe the world of phenomenon in a judgment-free way without mental resistance. And according to Tuffley, it's this kind of mental resistance to the events in our lives that inhibit us from experiencing happiness. So, to experience happiness, what we have to do is to learn to be fully absorbed in every moment that we experience, even if it seems to be insignificant. Now, Tuffley offers a personal example from his life that describes what this looks like. He describes a story about one day he's walking to his office and he comes across some moss that's growing in a sidewalk. He had recently committed himself to practicing this little piece of advice that I've just described to you. So he got down closely on his hands and knees and studied this moss so that he could fully absorb himself in experiencing it. And he describes how suddenly he was overcome with just a sense of joy at this connection that he's felt with this moss, another life form on Earth. It's a complex life form growing in a sidewalk crack, forgotten by the world. And he has this great sense of joy in just connecting with this piece of moss. So, you see, what Tuffley is trying to say is that he was able to find happiness in something that's as seemingly insignificant as a moss growing in a sidewalk crack. And this is what he's encouraging us to do, to open our minds to experience things fully, and we might find happiness in the simplest things. So in conclusion, David Tuffley's book, Being Happy, may be very basic, and its advice is some that we've heard many times before. But regardless of this, it's some advice that we should still take heed of in our daily lives if we seek to be happier. In this lecture, I've described to you one piece of Tuffley's advice, and this was to experience things fully, vividly, and selflessly. So now that you know this piece of advice, I encourage you guys to give it a try. Just as Tuffley showed us with his example about the moss, you can accept every situation you find yourself in, give it your full attention, your 100% effort, and don't resist it. Just accept the situation you're in and experience it fully. If you do this, you will find yourself in what Tuffley considers to be a self-actualized state and on your way to true happiness. So if you guys have any interest in reading the rest of Tuffley's advice, you can find his book on Amazon.com.